or a shattered empire, or what? Then you skip for another few hundred years, it's going to be completely different.
Right. But, and this is another point, it's really easy to change details of history. Who was the dictator of Rome at a particular time, what sort of civil wars it would lead to, etc., and so forth. Details like this, but the big developments in history, generally speaking, and let me put in a disclaimer, I don't in any way, shape, or form believe in historical inevitability, but I do believe that the broad developments generally happen for a reason, and that there's a certain momentum there, a certain inertia, and I don't think it's as easy to overcome that as a lot of writers of alternate history seem to think. For example, look at the idea of Carthage winning the Punic War, so there is no Roman Empire whatsoever. Not in the cards. Rome got to be the way it was for a reason. You look at a good book of historical demography. Once Rome got beyond the city-state idea, in other words, you could be a citizen of Rome, but also a citizen of the Roman Republic, that extended citizenship throughout Italy. The Greeks couldn't do that. The Greek democracy, Greek city-state democracy, was maniacally exclusive, and they remained divided, which is why they all got gobbled up by somebody else. The Romans went beyond this. They came up with a way to extend their republic to a larger polity, covering all of Italy. And if you look at a good book of historical demography, Italy was the population center of gravity of the Mediterranean at that time. Once the Romans unified it, there was really no stopping them. They could lose 50,000 men at Cannae, big deal.
Keep going.
Keep going.
It happens.
There's also logistics as well.
This is what I mean about things happening for a reason.
One of the things being an Italian is, of course, Roman Empire is, I mean, I don't want to say we have the old armor hidden someplace, but I mean, the name Antonelli is the plural of the diminutive of Antony, and the tradition is, of course, there's no way to prove this because there's no genealogy, but there's actually the story that when the Roman Civil War kicked off, Mark Antony asks soldiers, says, I need you to swear loyalty to me personally. I need protection for getting in the Civil War. There are people coming after me. And he had his soldiers swore loyalty to him. Then when it developed into a broader civil war, there was a faction of the soldiers that said, we signed up a personal loyalty to you, we're sticking with you. Okay, you're getting in a civil war. We didn't sign up for a civil war. They deserted, and they were mocked. They headed for the hills because they escaped reprisals, and people mocked them as Antony's little boys. They were little Antony's little boys, and that's what Antonelli means. And my father actually comes from the mountainous region of Italy. The Antonellis have lived there ever since. So although there's no direct attestation, the tradition, holds true. That, the Antonellis were the guys who deserted and were mocked because they didn't want to get involved in the Great War. I played this to my advantage when my wife needs some personal care, and I rub her feet. And I point out that Augustus criticized Mark Antony for being too beholden to Cleopatra by rubbing her feet at a public dinner. And I says, I am an Antonelli, and I'm rubbing your toes. So it might be a direct descendant of, you could be like Cleopatra, And
the blood will tell.
Yeah, and she doesn't believe it, but she says, keep massaging the feet. You will yet live to see another sunrise, nevertheless. Yes, sir.
Okay, we've talked about how others have done alternate history before, how apparently authors get alternate history fatigue at some point, and how just society, apart from nations, across nations, pushes back and kind of like families pushing their members back into their usual roles when somebody tries to change. Any advice on, say, we want to try to do some alternate history. I especially want to try differences in human nature and just show vignettes in a comic strip. How to go about being sufficiently consistent and plausible so it doesn't hurt people's brains.
Are you thinking in terms of some sort of supernatural or super scientific or whatever event that causes your change in human nature, or are you just taking it
just
as
an
a...
alternate universe?
I'm thinking of what I'm thinking of. If you read Howard Waldrop has written some alternate histories where you look at another aspect of a famous person, and you imagine if this person developed that other career. For instance, he wrote a story called Ike at the Mic, which takes off from the fact that Dwight Eisenhower played in a band in high school. And Eisenhower pursues a career in music, and he becomes the equivalent of Benny Goodman in an alternate history. And the story is set when he is doing his retirement, and he is honored by the U.S. Senator from Mississippi, who's Elvis Presley, which seems plausible because Presley was a showman and entertainer. You can imagine him going into entertainment. So he takes, it's like, it would be like, it's hard to deal with this. Nobody does this because he's such a reviled figure. But I mean, wouldn't it have been better if Hitler got into art school?
Yeah.
He would have been a mediocre artist, but he would have had a career. Somebody I made a joke about that, and then he said, yeah, but at least then the only thing he would have written was those whiny grant applications instead of Mein Kampf. But the fact is, Hitler wasn't. I mean, there's Hitler artwork that's for sale.
David Brin had an alternate World War II story in which Admiral Heinlein was leading the U.S. Navy, and he liked to read science fiction stories by Chester Nimitz. But
yeah, but you can understand.
Say instead of blowing up the Bamiyan booths, the Taliban said, like, okay, guys, you've got 3 Soviet tanks and all the ammo we could scrape up. Those statues, if they start moving, shoot them until they stop. Otherwise, just tell the tourists about the history. And the next day, they're standing out there just absolutely wide-eyed. It was nice of the lieutenant to introduce us to Doctor Who, but why did he have to start with Blink?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you smoke enough opium, the statues will eventually talk back at you. But that gets into weird fantasy,
But then you can't find the firing button.
Yeah, Howard Waldrop does the stuff where he does those kind of weird fantasies, alternate histories. That might be a place to look at it and check it out.
Okay.
Some inspiration
Is
along
that
those lines.
W-A-L-D-R-O-P?
WALDROP.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah, he won the Nebula Award in 1980 for the Ugly Chickens, which is a secret history about dodos. Yes, sir.
Oh, yes, I read that one.
But one of the things, at least I've noticed, is that for a long time, alternate history kind of, like you mentioned, it was its own very small subgenre. You had your Man in the High Castle, you bring the Jubilee, and not a whole lot else. But over the last 10, 20 years, it's really exploded and started to take on its own character. Why do you think the genre has become as popular as it is, that it's seen all the new books, writers, fandoms that it has?
Well, for one thing, Bruce Sterling and William Gibson, when they wrote The Difference Engine in 1990, they flat out said, technological improvement is going at a pace that we can't make any intelligent projections into the future, so we're going to do alternate steampunk. So we have something to write about. Charlie Strauss, who's Scott, editor, writer, he had a 3-book series about near future projection of technological trends. He did the first 2 books. He canceled the 3rd one because his 3rd one was going to be about surveillance technology and drones. He said, it's already past me.